Now you're very welcome back. That was Pat Nevin before the break. Nathan Murphy is with us. I know you were on OTBAM talking Bundesliga. For people who didn't see you talking Bundesliga or watch much Bundesliga, what was the verdict?
Well, I'm an expert now, Joe, on the Bundesliga. One weekend.
I saw some tweets which really blew my mind.
Oh my God. Don't joke about the Bundesliga. Turns out that everybody knew that Erling Haaland was related to Alf-Inge Haaland and didn't get the joke.
How did you not know that, Nathan, before?
Are you joking?
Yeah.
I was going to put one up then on Sunday talking about Thomas Muller and his performance for Bayern Munich and how his father Gerd would be really proud of him.
Thought better of it.
I just thought it's not worth it anymore. It's not worth it anymore. Obviously, it's a strange experience. How could it not be a strange experience? I just think give it a few weeks. Bayern Munich, Borussia Dortmund this night next week, where it feels like it really matters. And it's probably the sort of game you would tune into anyways, because it'll be of such high quality you would expect. So not every game is going to be exciting. Like, I would watch pretty much any Premier League game that's on the television, unless it's a huge Bundesliga game. I would rarely tune in. So there's a bit of a novelty of just how good are Schalke against Bayer Leverkusen. Again, it's going to be dead. It's a Saturday afternoon. It felt a bit dull. I'll be interested to see how to respond to that and how the Premier League respond. I know even today, again, they're talking about they're going to explore absolutely everything as to how to make the viewer experience that a little bit better. Whether that is funneling in crowd noises, which I think everyone's a bit uncomfortable about. But again, let's give it a go and see which is worse, whether it is the silence or whether actually they can find it, because the technology is so advanced, some sort of a balance for some decent crowd noise. But let's just get through these first few weeks and make sure that the Bundesliga can keep going from a health and safety point of view, first and foremost. And then we can worry about the rest of it, probably when leagues hopefully restart in August. But yeah, same with the golf. The golf was okay on Sunday night, but again, it didn't matter. So I still think a golf major would matter whether there's crowds there or not. Likewise, I think Liverpool, Manchester City in the Premier League would matter to the players whether there's a crowd there or not. But yeah, it's not ideal in any way.
Yeah. My takeaway from I didn't watch much of it at all, but watching the brief snippets I did after the fact, it was fine. Obviously a bit strange, it was fine, but it did occur to me, geez, when Champions League knockout football comes back, which really is the only football left this season with a bit of suspense, even Liverpool fans would acknowledge that's real suspense and high stakes. I think that'd be great. The crowd is a bit of a loss, but when we have PSG playing in the Champions League, or I forget where all the games were. PSG are playing Real Madrid, are they? I can't remember. God, it's a lifetime ago.
No, Manchester City are playing Real Madrid.
Yeah. Anyway, when we get back into that high stakes stuff, I think that it's going to be great. It's going to grip us all. It'll get millions. I think the games will be of a high intensity, and it'll be not ideal, but very, 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 very watchable. Like, I thought the opening week was grand.
Well, they're talking about the Champions League basically being one-legged semi-finals and quarterfinals all being played in Istanbul. So we already have 4 teams through to the quarterfinals: Paris Saint-Germain, Leipzig, Atalanta, and Atletico Madrid. And that when the other 4 teams go through, that they'll just play them all, sort of a festival of football, which keeps coming up in Istanbul as one-legged affairs. Okay. So again, maybe they build a bit of momentum. Football's back a couple of months at that stage. Yeah. We've seen everybody. You're excited for it. It is so every game, it seems, in the Premier League is going to be broadcast. How much interest will people have in that after a few weeks of watching Burnley against Watford? I think the novelty of that probably will wear off quite quickly. But you'd assume there'll be a huge audience for every Liverpool game, every Manchester United game, any of the top 6-7 teams.
Yeah, I would have thought so as well. Erling Haaland has now scored 10 Bundesliga goals in 9 games. He is really going to be special, this kid. I hadn't realised he was such a deliberately bad interviewee until this weekend. It's really blown up. There was a Norwegian journalist, and he was saying he has always been this way. It's part genuinely hates the media, and part almost seems to enjoy watching journalists squirming as they try and elicit more than 8 words from him. And apparently this Norwegian journalist I was watching said before, when he was in Norway, they said to him, why are you so bad at doing interviews? And he said, I get bored. And they said, "Are you bored now?" He said, "Yeah."
Yeah, he's still only 19 as well.
Yeah,
so I'm sure there's a little bit of immaturity in there that probably feels he doesn't have a huge amount to say right now. At times it felt like he did touch on being rude in that interview, post-match interview, but then you see the longer version and it wasn't quite as bad, and there was any amount of journalists rushing to his defense who have met him and interviewed him over recent times, that actually when he's not on mic is a perfectly polite young man who's more than happy to stop and chat and have a conversation. So I think people need to give him a little bit of a break.
Totally. It's definitely not criticizing him. He's perfectly entitled to. Ironically, it makes the interviews completely compelling. They're unmissable.
Yeah, what's next? Like that was the only real controversy of the weekend. That's what's going to be interesting as to how we react to the controversies, particularly in the Premier League. When is the first spitting controversy going to be? And how serious an event will that be? Like what happens with the first real cheating incident, whether it's a dive in the box and if there's no VAR and you get away with it, like, because are people going to come down twice as hard on somebody because, well, look at all the problems that are in the world right now. We have this guy cheating when football has been allowed to come back. I'll be fascinated to see if it's still the same sort of dominant narrative around football. And what's his name? Who's on? God, it doesn't even happen anymore on a Monday on Sky at 11 o'clock when Dermot Gallagher comes on and goes through all the incidents. Like, are these things, do they matter as much anymore, or do they matter more than ever?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Meanwhile, on Project Restart, Troy Deeney. So like this has been bubbling away. Like quite often, even doing the paper review on a Sunday, they will often have a Premier League player like a Willian or somebody who says, I'm not so sure about coming back, and nothing more seems to come of it. But Troy Deeney has spoken in the last 24 hours, Watford captain, and it was incredibly concrete and clear. He is not going back, and explained his reasons.
Yeah, and a very high-profile player, captain of his club, and has really, I think, asked some serious questions of the Premier League as to what they're going to do for Black, Asian and ethnic minority players who all the statistics say are far more at risk due to coronavirus, 4 times more likely to die. And initially when I read that, I sort of assumed it was because, unfortunately, in Britain, that people from those ethnic minorities suffer from deprivation more or existing health conditions because of the way they've been treated in the country. But apparently it's not, that even when you take that away, that the initial research, and again, we're very obviously at an early stage of this, shows they are 4 times more at risk. So he's been asking a lot of questions at these meetings that have been happening with the captains, and asking that our players who are Black, Asian and from ethnic minorities, are they going to receive extra testing? Are they going to receive extra heart screening? And who's going to pay for that if they are? And I don't think he's received any answers around that so far. The PFA today have said they've asked the Premier League to go and conduct extra research into the possible effects of COVID-19, but they haven't got the answers. And you can't imagine that he will be the last. And what happens? So Watford now are without their captain. Maybe in a month's time, some extra research has taken place and he feels a little bit more comfortable going back. But if he doesn't, and if this escalates and you end up with several players from several clubs deciding not to go. Remember, Watford are right in a relegation mix, that if their captain and one of their most important players decides not to go back, again, are you facing all sorts of legal issues?
Yeah.
And it is the question, and the biggest question, I think, dogging the Premier League is, I think everyone accepts that they're right to go and plan to come back, but is it still too early? Do we know enough? And I think clearly the answer is we don't know enough. We don't know everything about every possible risk for every individual. Like Troy Deeney pointed out that his young son, I think only 5 months old, has breathing difficulties. So obviously doesn't want to be returning home, even if he has been isolating. Never mind the simple fact that if he has a 5-month-old at home, does he want to be going and quarantining himself for several weeks away from his family?
Yeah.
But like Dr. Alan Byrne was talking on FAI TV last night about the potential for football in Ireland to return, and basically said we have to get it down to an acceptable risk. And that's where we're at. Like, there is no zero risk in this for footballers. But what is the acceptable risk? It's going to be different for an awful lot of people. And what happens to players who say it's not acceptable? So Watford, I think, understandably, Nigel Pearson's been quite strong on this, have been very sympathetic. I saw Frank Lampard saying that clubs are going to have to be sympathetic towards players who don't want to return to training and who don't want to return for matches. But this is a billion-dollar industry. So if Troy Deeney doesn't return, Watford get relegated. What happens? What happens is contract. Is he within his rights to say, I'm not going to play, but you have to maintain paying me every week? But this is where there's still so many parts of this that could just get so messy.
Yes. And he's not the only one. I saw Grant Hanley of Norwich was saying his wife is due in July with their child, and he's not very interested in taking home coronavirus and is not taking that risk.
Well, we did a panel on Thursday with a few different Irish players who are playing in various leagues. So Daryl Horgan, who's obviously was up in Scotland, which has now finished, Joe. We had Alan Judge, who's injured at the moment, with Ipswich, and Paul Gammond, who's with Newport, and their season has now finished in League Two. And even among the three of them, I think there were different attitudes as to whether or not they would go back. Like Daryl Horgan was very much making the point that it's so early, and expecting players to go and separate from their families for 3 or 4 weeks to then put their health at risk while they're doing that is just going to be far too much of an ask for a lot of players. And it is different for the Premier League players without question, because they can be tested more than everybody else and they can afford to get the best of absolutely everything, but it doesn't guarantee them anything.
No.
So it just feels, again, I just don't understand why there is such a rush. I know UEFA are putting them under pressure, but because the World Cup isn't there in the summer of 2022, if you need to start the new season, wait until September, October to finish the season. Start the new season in December if needs be. These are extraordinary times. What is the unbelievable rush to get this done by the end of July?
Yes. I've had that question for a while and I haven't heard a great answer yet. So that's where we are. June 12th was the initial date that they were very keen to get back playing on. From the 1st of June, the UK government has given a thumbs up to behind closed doors sport. Now, June 12th from now is about 3.5 weeks away. The Bundesliga, which when, you know, if we're taking today as phase one, the players' non-contact training happening from today, it took the Bundesliga 5 weeks to get to what we just saw at the weekend. So June 12th, probably ambitious for Premier League, but we're conceivably looking at June 19th or 26th by the time they get their ducks in a row and get this thing going. And then matches pretty much every day, give or take, for TV purposes, everything on. And they'll be looking nervously over to Germany because the consequences of what's just happened in Germany are still unknown.
Exactly. And I don't think we'll be known for, another week, 10 days, even a couple of weeks potentially. And we also don't know what the reaction. You'd have to imagine that they have contingencies in place. We've already seen that players have tested positive while training and they've continued on. So if a player tests positive in a match, is that the end of it? By the way they've gone so far, to be a surprise. But there's all sorts of effects of this that we just won't know. So if players aren't allowed contact training, how does that affect them differently in terms of injuries during matches? Also, if matches now are going to be crowded and they're playing twice a week, what sort of long-term effect is that going to have on various players? And while the point I've seen brought up quite a few times by a lot of the Premier League players is we look at them rightly as incredibly fit young men in their 20s. But by the end of a match, when they've ran 12, 13 kilometers under intense pressure, their immune system is incredibly low. So to think that they are somehow immune because of their fitness is just wrong. So, yeah, you just hope, but it is hope in a time when there isn't much hope in any other aspect that somehow football can survive through this.
Yeah, and there still is no white smoke on when we get the League of Ireland back. Dan McDonnell made the point that of all the summer leagues, the Irish one is the only one still without plan to resume. Part of the issue is that it's also the most reliant league of all of those leagues on gate receipts, and therein lies a significant part of the problem. But there's no white smoke there, and I haven't heard any date yet on potential resumption of League of Ireland.
Well, Dr. Alan Byrne was making the point that as part of the plan that was released last week, that they're aiming to start training on the 8th of June. Okay. And then this is for the 4 clubs that are planning on having this little round robin tournament involving the European teams. So Dundalk, Shamrock Rovers, Derry and Bohemians. And those 4 will go back on June 8th. They will then assess those sides, how they can train with social distancing, how they can get to training centres with social distancing. Those players will be tested, and that will be one more step along the road. But a lot of this was built around where the revenue comes from. Nobody still seems to know. And it's the most important question of all. Who pays the players if there's nobody coming through gates? Teams and clubs were struggling. The vast majority of them, with the exception of maybe 2 or 3, are struggling at the best of times, even with crowds coming in the door every Friday, Saturday. How do they survive without that? When we talked about streaming initially, it was almost with a sense of, well, maybe Irish sport could come back first. And while there's very little on television Maybe the League of Ireland could be there to fill a gap in people's lives and gamblers' lives, and it would be, again, we'd stream all the matches and people from around the world would tune into this. That's probably gone now because the Bundesliga is back. And again, if the Premier League can't come back, it's hard to see how the League of Ireland returns. So listen, they have plans in place. Clearly things are a lot better in terms of a crisis like this, and that it seems as though they're trying every possible avenue. But still, the number one question that every club is asking is, where's the money coming from? And there's still no answer to that. And until there is, it's impossible really to see how the League of Ireland returns. Yeah.
One last point before we go. Speaking of money, I saw a Nigel Clough headline.
Yeah, Nigel Clough. He was in charge of Burton Albion, but he's left the club by mutual consent. Basically, he realised that the club just simply couldn't afford to pay him and couldn't afford to see out his contract. Burton are in League One. We had Stephen Quinn on the show a few weeks back. He's playing with Burton as well. So obviously, League One hasn't actually been cancelled yet. A lot of the clubs in and around the playoff places and in contention for the playoff places want to continue. Pretty much all the other clubs just want the season to end now because they can't afford to keep paying their players. So there are going to be more meetings this week, but Clough was on a bit of a rolling contract, so he's resigned basically to try and help the club out so that they don't have to pay him while there's such uncertainty, and this could run on for another 3 or 4 months. Gary Crosby, who's assistant, he stepped away as well. So I think a classy touch from Nigel Clough, because I'd imagine he was on a decent contract there as well, and they put in one of the players as player manager for the next little while. Their captain, Jake Buxton, you would assume on a lower salary. So again, there's just so much up in the air with regards to League One, League Two clubs as to how they can sustain this, much like the League of Ireland, without anybody coming through the door for the next year, potentially.
Yeah, strange times. I'm presuming Jake didn't go in and say, pay me what the last guy got, pay me what I'm owed.
Yeah. I may not have a match for 6 months, but hey.
Yeah. Okay. Nathan Murphy, very good. Thanks, Emil.
Cheers, Joe.